Welcome to all of our Becoming Your Best podcast listeners, wherever you may be in the world today. This is your host, Steve Schallenberger, and we truly have an international podcast going on with our guest. He is known for creative, innovative solutions and strategies, turning challenges into opportunities and supporting organizations to implement these strategies to realize their ambitions and grow their businesses and organizations. His innovative approach fosters a customer-centric, data-driven, and agile culture across the entire set of organizations, leading to double-digit growth and increased business valuations. Welcome, Jim Stevenson.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. Been excited to have you. We've been introduced with one another from Jenny, a common friend who is hails from Australia. So I'll tell you just a little bit more about Jim before we launch into our interview. For our listeners' benefit, he's the founder and CEO of Bletchley Group and is a proven strategic advisor and inspirational leader who drives business growth through complex, challenging, or uncertain times. So he has a career that's 20 years plus. He's focused on strategy, organizational transformation, and growth, adding over $700 million in value to clients. He has a wide range of clients and a wide range of emphasis in business success. So, Jim, let's get going today. Tell us about your background, including any turning points in your life that's had a significant impact on you.
Absolutely. I'm not sure the podcast is long enough, but I'll give you the condensed version of all of that. My journey's been quite exciting, and I've loved every second of it. So I started out life in Scotland in construction, and I only say that because the job I had is unique to the UK, but it's a very commercial role. So it was very much the legal contracts and the finances for construction projects.
Well, let's just dive right into what your specialty has been. And can you explain why empowering teams is crucial for organizations, especially in today's volatile and uncertain environment?
Absolutely. I love the question because I think empowering teams is just so important regardless. And the world is a really problematic world at the moment. There's so much happening. We've come out of the pandemic. We've come out of supply chain challenges. So empowering your team for me is just vital. There is nothing other than empowering your team. And the reason for that is when you have an empowered team, generally empowered teams are empowered by giving them business objectives to focus on. So they understand what the business is trying to achieve. They understand what you're trying to get to as a business, not as a project, not as a team, not as a small group of skunk works people. And that fundamental change of empowering your people means that you get the power of teams in your solution making. It's not just the highest paid individual in the room that makes the decision of what the solution should be. It's the team that's empowered to make those decisions. And that means the team's much more resilient and adaptable going forward. And that resilience and adaptable of the empowerment means that when something uncertain happens, the team roll with it. They change the process, they change the solution, they move forward, always keeping in mind the business objective that they're trying to get to. And that's really, really important. And to be honest, that's a single reason why most traditional projects fail. When things change, they don't adapt to that change quickly enough. They focus on what were we trying to deliver, regardless of the fact that the environment round about them's changed. So it becomes problematic to have that. And empowering your team allows them to be that resilience, that change, that flexibility. It also means that they come back to you with much more powerful solutions. If they know that your business objective is X, they can come back and say, well, we can get to X, whatever that is, grow your sales, grow your conversion, whatever those metrics are that you're working towards. We can get there in 3 months, but we can do this little smaller thing, and we can start making an impact on that in a few weeks. because they know what the business is doing, because they know what the business outcome is, and you've empowered them. And that empowerment allows them to come back to you with those decisions, as opposed to the traditional, can you deliver this by then with this amount of money in this scope? It allows them to be much more flexible to help you manage your business going forward.
What are the most important aspects of what you can provide a team so they can be empowered?
There's two main things here. The big one for me is always culture. I think it was the Harvard Business Review editor said probably 30 years ago now, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it is 100% true. I've done so many transformations within businesses, and some call it digital transformation, some call it whatever. The reality is they're all cultural transformations. That's what makes these things work. So the culture of setting your business objective, the culture of creating an environment for success, the culture of trusting your team to go away and make decisions. You don't need to spoon feed them. You don't need to validate everything they're doing. You trust them to go away and do what you need. And that also then means they have autonomy. And because they have autonomy in what they're doing, they feel heard. They feel valued. They feel engaged and satisfied in their jobs. And they're inspired to come up with the next solution to move the business forward. And because of that, they're fulfilled in their job, and it makes it great. But then that also goes hand in hand with creating a process. Process allows you to scale and to expand and everyone to be on the same page. So you need a process that enables all of this. And I found an agile process is by far the most successful. Agile is the process, the methodology. But there's also agile with a small e, which is the mindset that goes with it. So it's the culture of agility as a culture, and the process of agile to allow you to have a level of control, a level of monitoring as you move forward, so that you've got some control of the business, you know where you're going, you're setting objectives properly, everyone's clear on what's happening, but then the team are empowered to make that work. So something silly as an example of the process. It's very often people talk about RAG statuses, of red, amber, green, of traffic lights, of how you're doing. I changed that. So it's the RAG status shouldn't be for your progress or issues. It should be for how the team's coping. So I've always said that a red status doesn't mean to say that the team's a bad team. It doesn't mean to say the team's failed. It means that the team needs some external help to allow them to overcome an issue. So what they're asking for is someone more senior in the organisation or different to the organisation to come in and help them with an issue that they don't have the resources to do themselves. And I found even that change in that mindset has helped significantly, again, to empower the team to do what you're asking them to do.
Okay, and one of the things that's come to mind is that, of course, these things that we're talking about, the principles, practices we're talking about today, of course, apply in the business world, in organizations, in teams
Yes.
of all sizes, but they also can apply to a soccer team. It can apply to a family. The very same thing you're
Yeah.
talking about. You're creating a culture that creates a winning environment. And so, what are some of the key elements you've discovered and observed, Jim, that leaders can help instill within their organization that produces that culture, the culture that you want? And how do you approach that? And how do you set that vision and people start buying into it and understanding? What's that process like?
Yeah, I love the fact that you've equated this to sports, because the whole agile mindset came from a rugby approach as opposed to a football approach, or at least a soccer approach, where it's not linear. You're not passing the ball down. The whole team is moving down in one. So yeah, absolutely. And for leaders, it's about understanding that you're there not to beat up your team. You're not to drive your team. You're not to kind of push them into delivery. You're there to encourage them. You're there to draw out the best in them. You're there to coach them. So when you see someone that is failing, it's not a failure on them. It's a failure on you because you didn't give them the right support. You didn't give them the right training. You've not done something. So it's about fostering that culture of building people up to be their best success, not about knocking them down because they failed to meet a stupid delivery that wouldn't actually move your business forward anyway. I like the quote from Einstein. if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will always be a failure. As leaders, it is incumbent on us to find what a fish is good at and find who is good at climbing the tree, and then encourage them to do more of that. And sometimes, as leaders, that means that you actually take someone out of the job they're in and move them to another job, because that's the job that they were meant to be doing. That's the job that their skill set is. That's the job that they're passionate about. So you've got to do that. I remember working with the Guardian, and one of the things that I always thought was great there was we would actually encourage people to leave the organization. And it wasn't, oh, we're firing you or you're terrible. It was, we can no longer promote you higher than you are today, and you're so much better than we can provide to you. So we'd give them all the support. They weren't fired. They could stay there another 10 years if they chose to. But it was building those people up to do the best that they can, and then watch them flourish. And to be honest, as a leader, watching someone that you've helped and grow, and you can't take credit for it because it's all them, but you can give them the support, you can give them the environment to be their best self. And that's what I think leaders need to be focusing on. It's not about this delivery or that delivery. It's about growing the people, and let them worry about your delivery. Let them worry about the business objective that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and they have to understand it, right, Jim? I mean, people have to
Yeah,
know this is where we're going as an organization. Here are the core values we work by. It's how we treat one another. And but you're here for a reason. You're here to contribute and see things. So what have
yeah,
you've probably observed really successful teams and organizations that are great in empowerment. They teach agility, but you've probably seen some that aren't so good. What's the difference?
yeah.
What have you seen as the difference and those elements that really make a difference that we can teach and put into our organization?
The difference is stark, and for me personally, it comes down to culture, leadership style, who the leaders are, and what their drive is. I'll give you two very stark different organizations in the same industry. So I used to work with News Corp, and I used to work with the Guardian newspaper. News Corp was very old fashioned, very traditional. You were set a target, you had to meet the target. You were judged pass or fail whether you met that target, and it was drive, 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 get it done, do 8 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. It was there. And the funny thing was, we had one engineer that worked with us in that environment. And this applies to everyone. I'm using an engineer, but it could be anything. We had one engineer who had the biggest failure rate of everyone. And it was just shocking. He failed at pretty much 90% of what he did. But he was our best engineer. He failed at everything because he did things that no one else could. He did things, he tried things, he experimented with things. He was the one, if you had a problem that no one else could fix, you gave it to him. And he succeeded most of the times, but he failed quite a lot. But even in his failures, he moved us forward. He succeeded at something, but technically in that kind of toxic, that struggling environment where you're driving people, he was viewed as a failure because, hey, he didn't meet the target. He got his 90% to the target, but he didn't meet the target, so he failed. The opposite is exactly true of the Guardian. And again, news media, newspapers, and content, and they were just wonderful because they built people up. Failure wasn't seen as a failure. Failure was seen as a learning opportunity. You would learn as an individual, you'd learn as a team, you'd learn as an organization. You would share the learning. At the Guardian, we used to have every Friday afternoon, the last hour of the week, we would have people telling us about their successes and their failures so that we were sharing that learning. And that was an entirely different culture, an entirely different way of working. And I can tell you the one that I preferred working in, and I can also tell you the one that was more successful. And I don't think that you need to kind of guess too hard on which one that was.
Yeah, that's true. Um, well, what have you learned, Jim, about organizational structure and how it impacts empowerment and productivity?
I love that question. I worked with a company in Switzerland, and I spent a good year there, flying in and out of Switzerland. It was a great company. It was a great experience, and the guys there were fantastic. But when I joined them, they had their own building over 4 floors, and they had one team on the ground floor and one team on the second floor and one team on the third floor. So whenever you wanted to organize a meeting, You were always having to formalize something, and my diary's busy today, so we can do it tomorrow. Oh, my diary's busy tomorrow, so you do the next day. The collaboration just took forever to organize. Um, and please don't tell the client this, but one of the first things I did was I moved people's desks. And to be honest, I could have walked away then. I could have walked away, but just putting the team that was working together in the one place so that you were collaborating by turning around in your swivel chair, that was the biggest change ever. It genuinely was. But I mean, there's more to it than that. The other thing that I find in organization structures, which can be a challenge, is we organize structures by functional team. So you have the marketing, the sales team, customer service, product, production, whatever your organization is, you're organized in functional teams. And yet your customer comes in and they go through all of those teams. Your customer doesn't care whether you're sitting in marketing or sales or customer service. Your customer has a problem with the company, and your customer touches all of those teams at some point. And I've always found that it's the gap between each of those teams. It's when the handover happens. That's when customers get lost. That's when the quality of customer service drops down. That's when the customer experience is an issue, and that's when things happen. So the more you can take away those silos and actually get into functional teams. So if you're selling a product, you're that product team, you're a sales for that product team, you're the marketing for that product team, you're customer service for that product team. So that you're taking away those silos as much as you possibly can, because those are the silos when you're handing from one team to the next that the problems occur. So it's a very simplistic thought. So, but you have functional teams, and then you have the way your customer thinks. Think like your customer. One, that allows your team to be more empowered, to have build domain knowledge, to understand the customer's needs and wants as you're going through. It stops these silos from happening and problems being caused by that. And generally, you find that your employees, because they're empowered, because they're feeling that they've got the autonomy to make decisions, they feel happier because they're servicing a group of people that they can see. It's a tangible group of people, and that's their pride. They get pride in servicing that group of people because that's their team. That's where they're going, and it's an incredibly simple concept. It's amazing how many companies haven't done it.
Yeah. So as a leader, really what we want to be thinking about is how do we take the barriers away that keep us from being empowered, from working together easily. And the other thing I
Yeah,
was thinking of while you were speaking is being sure that people know we believe in them. Uh,
yeah.
they're here for a reason. They can make a difference, and so we want to provide the direction and the guidelines. Here's how we do things, but go for it.
I find one of the biggest proxies for that kind of mindset, because I completely agree with you. It's whether your team feels empowered to fail. And the one thing is, if you're in an organization where failure is viewed as negative and people are going to be fired or bonuses aren't going to get paid, that dictates a culture.
Mm.
If you're in an organization where someone fails, it's viewed as, what did we learn? It's only a failure if we didn't learn anything. If we learned something and we shared that learning, we'll move forward. It's funny, there was a story I heard a few weeks ago, and it's probably entirely wrong, but it's a good story anyway. It was I think it was an old IBM story, but an employee went into the CEO of IBM and said, "I'm sorry, but I've made a mistake. I've just cost the company 600,000 because I made $600,000 because I made this mistake." And he says, "I'm obviously going to resign because I made the mistake. I'm really sorry." And the CEO said, "Why would you resign? I've just spent 600,000 to teach you a lesson. Why do I want you to go away and take that lesson to some other competitor?" And it's very true. You need to learn from your lessons. We all make them. We all make mistakes. We all learn from those things. You need to share and embellish them, and view them as a learning experience, nothing more than that.
So, Jim, as you think about setting up teams, creating cultures that can eat strategy for lunch, of course, so it's very powerful. What are some of the most important elements that allow us to do that from your point of view?
I think for me the elements that are in there that allows you to do things like that are the structure that you put in place. I'm a huge fan of agile, both the big A, the process, and the small A, the mindset and the culture. And I think we absolutely need those things in place to make this work. But I think there's more to it than just the agility of teams and how you're doing them. It's showing teams that they are empowered. It's allowing them to fail, celebrating the failure and the learning that comes from it. Because those are the things that will ultimately change your culture. I also like the idea that any team should be able to question the CEO, and the CEO should not be immune from this. Someone should be able to say to the CEO, you gave us a town hall and you explained to us the strategy. I missed that, but I didn't understand why we're doing that. Can you help me understand? Because that's where collaboration comes from. And collaboration could come from the board all the way down to the most junior and all the way back up again. So you've got those types of elements through this whole process of how you get this to work. So it's that agile process which is set up to encourage people, to allow them to be empowered, to build trust in them as they're moving forward. And then you've got the culture that runs with it as well.
Okay, good. So it's really communicating. Part of it is communicating and saying, listen, you are an important part of our organization. We value you. We want you to speak out. We want you to share your thoughts and to make a difference. And we're doing this together.
And
Is that?
completely. And to go back to your earlier comment, I would like to think that that's what we do in our families, and that's what we do in our sports teams and any other team that we've got. The principles are exactly the same. I don't understand why, when you move into a work environment, suddenly people think it's different. It's like you spend too many hours at your work environment not to, one, enjoy it, like who you're working with, feel like you're being heard and you're being successful, and you've got the autonomy to do what you know you're good at to move forward. So yeah, allow people to be heard, communicate clearly. I think specifically within that whole how do you communicate, I do like the notion of OKRs, which can very often be misunderstood and misinterpreted. But it's a way of forcing you to give the objective. Don't give a task. Don't give a job for someone to do. Give an outcome. Make it an outcome. And then tell them how you're going to judge that success. I want you to increase our conversion by 5%. It's very clear what that team is being tasked to do. It's very clear how they're going to be judged. It's very clear what they need to go away and do to achieve that. So they've got clarity. They know what they own. They know what's expected of them. And to be honest, even if they only change your conversion by 3.5%, that's still a win. That's a big win. So they might not get to your 5, but they've made significant steps towards that. So absolutely, communication and bringing all that together.
Okay, that's a really important thing that you're talking about right now is really outlining what the vision is on this project, on this thing, and we need you to go solve this problem. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, what you're talking about is here's how we measure whether we did it or not, right? But you
yeah.
can do it. We want you to go do it, but here's what the expectation is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, and I don't know any company that did this, but it would be kind of the equivalent of saying to someone, go make the company better. And they say,
No.
well, how do you want me to do that? I've no idea. And what we need to do is say, you and your team, I want you to make conversion better by 5%. Another team, I want you to give me 10,000 more leads coming through our sales funnel. And another team, I want you to make our customers happy. So I want you to focus on improving our NPS score or whatever measure you have there. But suddenly those are very tangible things. They're very clear that each team can own them. They've got autonomy for them. They're very clear that you trust them to go away and do that because you're not micromanaging them and tell them, do this task, do that task, and we'll see what the outcome is. So all of that goes together in a very succinct way of everything we've spoken about. Is it builds that trust, it builds teamwork, it builds the leadership changing how they lead by setting that objective and being very clear what the metric is that they're going to be driven by. And it coalesces all of that thinking into, you need the right culture to make that work. You need a bit of a process in there to allow people to have the flexibility to do what they need to do, but it's very clear what they're trying to achieve.
So, Jim, you're going to have some people that really respond to that and they perform,
Yeah,
they deliver time after time after time. Sometimes they're going to fail. That's part of business, but we learn from it and move ahead, right? But what happens if
yeah.
you have a person that just doesn't do it, just doesn't get it? They can't get it. They don't contribute. They don't perform. What do you do about that?
I think there's two or three things to mention in there. One is having teams that perform is less about the team performing and it's more about your hiring practices. You need to make sure that you're hiring the right people into the right environment with the right skill set, the right attitude to enhance the team, not to be anything else. Where you've got people who aren't performing, I did a big transformation project for a big retailer in the UK called Marks and Spencer's. Huge by UK standards. And I did a transformation process, and there was 200 or 300 people in the team, and there was 4 of them who just thought I was mad. Everything I was saying didn't make sense. It was just complete bonkers to them. And I remember I went to a conference 2 years after I finished doing that transformation piece. And one of those 4 guys came up and gave me a cuddle. I'd never seen him in the 2 years. And by accident, we were at the same conference. And he just came up and gave me a cuddle and went, I get it now. I understand. I see what you were trying to say. So I think not everyone gets it. Not everyone gets it in the same time scale. Not everyone understands it. But I think it just takes time, and then people will come round. But equally, if people don't come round, sometimes you've got no option. And that goes back to the if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Sometimes people don't like that environment. Sometimes that's not the environment for them. Sometimes they need a different job, a different role, a different career. And for me, that's more about you explaining to them why they're not fitting in, why their skill set doesn't work, and helping them find something that they're going to be happy with, helping them something that they can go away and be successful at, because that environment isn't the one that's going to make them happy.
Okay, where they can really contribute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if not, help them find some place else where they can contribute, so they're growing and doing their, whatever they need to do. But that's what helps everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all have friends either now or in the past that were in a job that they weren't happy with, they weren't feeling satisfied. They were every Monday morning they would be grumpy about it. I'm going back into the office and whatever it is. And the reality is, I feel sorry for those people. They need to find something that they're happy at, and then they'll be good at it. And then when they're good at it, they'll be successful at it. Persevering with something that you're unhappy with isn't going to get you further down the progress in any meaningful way. It just means you're going to be unhappy every Monday morning, and you're going through Groundhog Day.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of empowerment, and our job of working together is we get everybody moving in the right direction. And if it can't happen, we say, listen, it's the way it goes, and we want you to be successful, and we want to be successful. So thank you, and let's help you to get to that place.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean, what?
Go ahead.
On you go.
Okay, well,
I was going to say one of the.
Yeah, I'm always shocked how fast things go, Jim. And so we're at the end of our interview already. And any final tips you'd like to leave with our listeners today that can be helpful?
If you're a leader and you're thinking about changing how you can lead your team to be far more successful, for me, the reality is move forward and leave your ego behind. It's not about you, your ego, what you know. It's about building your team, encouraging your team, and allowing your team to grow and be successful.
Okay. All right. And Jim, how can people find out about what you're doing?
The easiest way is my website, so it's Bletchley Group, after Bletchley Park, so Bletchley group.com. Or I'm on LinkedIn as Jim Stevenson, so you'll find me in Jim Stevenson on LinkedIn, and that's a good way to find me as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, I've loved having you with us today. Fun to have an international flavor here with us. And to all of our listeners, it's been a delight to get some of these different thoughts that Jim Stevenson has brought with us. It's a real important subject for each one of us to create winning cultures in our own lives, with each other and with our teams and in our professional life. So thanks for the thoughts you brought to us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great chatting with you. I've enjoyed it really.
Well, we wish you the best in all that you're doing.
Thanks, Steve.
And to all of our listeners, we are so grateful to have you with us. Thank you for your example. We wish we could be in the same room with you and get your thoughts on this as well. any questions, but it's been really wonderful. We wish you the best in all that you're doing. You're making a difference. You're lifting and building lives and creating opportunities, working to create that culture that brings out the best in people. So thank you for being with us. This is Steve Schallenberger signing off. Thanks to our guest, Jim Stevenson.